Hello and welcome to a new idea I have for session one. As we go through our course, you often have lots of great questions and I tend to respond to them in writing. But I realize that that is a little bit frustrating because you have so much to read and then I write more for you to read. So I wanted to explore the questions that you had in session one where we asked what you would like to know more about. I thought I would explore them with a PowerPoint and a video to get you going with them. So some of the ideas that we tackled were things like brainstorming, different styles of writing, how to effectively write, how to keep it short and sweet but clear, paragraph structure, transitions, and punctuation. I have links throughout, but I'm also sending this as a PowerPoint so that you have access to all of those links. So if you feel like you've missed something, you can listen and you can also look at the PowerPoint. Brainstorming. This was a great question. In session three, we're going to explore the idea of mind maps with this specific article. Another resource I like is the Purdue OWL, which has this section on choosing a topic for research papers, because it's going to walk you through some of those core ideas and concepts. Something to think about as you do some research and as we look at this in session three is that we're all individuals. So it's important to look at each concept in terms of you. You know, what do you like? What are your natural inclinations? So do some research, trial some different ideas, and see what fits you. For instance, I like to make lists. So because of that, I use the concept of listing as a method for organizing my thoughts and listing ideas for concepts. Another thing that I like to do is to talk about these ideas. So if no one's there for me to talk to, I talk to myself. And hearing those ideas aloud is really helpful. It helps me to sort of zone in and focus in on things that are really useful, and it also helps me rule out my wilder ideas. Different styles of writing. There are lots of ways to do some searches on this. You could look up types of essays, types of writing, writing styles, and you'll get lots of different concepts. So I thought I'd start you off with types of essays. As you can see, this has a handy list. It gives you sort of the key word that you can use to go do more searches, and then it gives you some bullet points to help you walk through it. The main thing you want to ask yourself is, what do I want to achieve? So two key questions for that. What is the goal? What do you want your reader to do, to think, to say, how do you want that to be expressed by the time the work is done? And more importantly, who's your audience? That's going to really change how you approach that goal. So even if I'm writing two essays and they're both persuasive, they could be really different based on the audience or what my end goals are. Test it out. Ask these questions about works you are reading. Reading is one of those key elements that, strangely enough, the opposite of writing, is one thing that really supports your writing. So as you read, start to apply the different ideas that we utilize. If we're looking at paragraphs, dissect a paragraph of something that you're reading. Ask questions like this. Who is the audience? What is the goal of the article you are reading? And see how other people do it. And then ask yourself that about older works that you have as you gain in skills and knowledge. Effective writing. That is always really hard because it's going to be really varied. What I consider effective for my topic and my approach and my voice may be very different from what you are doing. So be cohesive. Ask yourself as you go through it, does every sentence support the paragraph? Does every paragraph support the overall work? That's really going to help your reader understand your goals and your concepts. Revising and editing are two other sides of this. When we revise, we want to be ruthless. So it's really great if you've written too much because you can cut. The aim is to ask those above questions. Does each sentence support this paragraph? Cut out the ones that aren't, shorten them, tighten them, and use things that we're going to discuss in a moment, like transitions and looking at that overall cohesion. Don't forget that you may cut a bunch, but then you may end up rewriting some elements. So just because you're cutting it doesn't mean you aren't going to then add something else. I also like to point out editing here because grammar and punctuation should support your work. They should never distract from what you are accomplishing. And we always want to do everything we can to make that grammar as clear as possible, which we have some slides on in a minute. My favorite resources, the Purdue OWL. I'm going to mention this all the time, the online writing lab. It's frequently updated. They do a really good job of covering all kinds of different concepts. So I hope you will explore it. Books that I like are things like the Bedford Handbook and Strunk and White's Elements of Style. Be an inquisitive reader. If you're asking the question, then other people probably have too. If you're curious about something, for instance, thesis statements, read 2 articles and look for that. Find it within that work. And that should help you start to make some of those recognition jumps where you start to say, oh, I see where that is. I see how that works. Ask those questions everywhere you go. Paragraph structure. Again, go explore the Purdue OWL. Look at paragraphs, look at paragraphing. We're going to talk pretty soon about 5-paragraph essays. I like to think about that style, that 5-point style, as both expandable and shrinkable. So while it could be 5 paragraphs, it could also be 5 sentences. We have an introduction, we have 3 supports, and a conclusion. Do you always use all of them? Absolutely not. You may find that you need 2 things or 5 things or 7 things. That is all going to vary, but you're going to need to tell your reader what they're going to read. That's our introduction. You're going to need to support that. You're going to need to tell them what you're going to tell them. And then in your conclusion, you're going to need to tell them what you told them. Our example here is that in your introduction, you're going to tell the reader what you're going to tell them. Then in support points 1, 2, 3, more or less, you're going to tell them what you want to share. And finally, you're going to conclude by telling them what you told them. It's an envelope pattern. To grow this, you begin to write paragraphs that become chapters, that become books. They can grow as much as we want, but it can also shrink to sentences. Transitions. There are 2 links here, 1 to transitions and the idea of them, and 2 to transitional devices. So 1, when I'm reading a paragraph, I like to conclude as well as cast a shadow. I want to give a hint to my reader on what's coming next. And when I start that next paragraph, I'm going to use specific words that give clues about the form of that paragraph. So for instance, look at the list to see what you want to do. When you look at those lists, choose a couple of words to play with. So maybe things like next or first, second, third, maybe things like finally, maybe words that fall into the add or the repeat or the emphasize categories. You want to explore these and see what works for you. You may find that certain words just don't fit your style and your approach. So toss those away. Look for other ones. Punctuation. You may not have certain ideas right now on what kind of punctuation you want to explore. Read as much as you can. Explore what kinds of ideas are out there. So for instance, maybe you're interested in a specific one like commas. So you want to go see as much as you can about that topic. You want to look at how people are using commas and if they're using them correctly. Maybe you don't have an idea of what to explore, but as we go through the course, you're going to find that. You're going to find the language you need to explore that. Writing is a continually evolving skill. I try to choose specific items to work on. For instance, years ago, I worked on comma splices. Recently, in the last 4 years, I started working on split infinitives. Right now, I'm working on cohesiveness. When someone said, you have a problem with split infinitives, I was like, oh, sure, yeah, totally, I will work on that. I didn't know what they were talking about. So then I had to go Google that. I had to go look it up. And then now I'm really confident about it because I see it in my own work. I see it in other people's work. I have a reason for why I like it sometimes and I don't like it other times. I have all sorts of supports to go with it. But as my confidence increased, it gave me the chance to move on to the next thing. So now, of course, I'm working on cohesiveness. So you've got to play with it. You've got to see what's going on, and you will grow as a person as you move through life, and you will also grow as a writer. Finally, grammar. Editing is super hard work, so consider some support websites. Things like bibme.org are really useful as citation machines. They will help you create and organize your references when you get to references and research papers. Other sites are just for grammar, so things like grammarly.com, Pearson Writer, and don't underestimate your own grammar and spell check software. Look for those little green and red squiggly lines. Run a check as you go through. to see what you can do to fix it. And as it comes up with things, go search those out on the internet and say, well, what does it mean when it says I have a problem here? What does that look like, and why is it a problem? So I hope this gives you some great ideas to get going with your writing. I hope this is helpful. I really enjoyed your questions, and I look forward to more questions for the next session. So have a great week.